Hi everybody, thanks for joining me here today. In this video, we're going to talk about compa ratios. We're going to answer the question, what is a compa ratio and how do I calculate one? So the first thing we want to discuss is the basic idea of the compa ratio. And what we use a compa ratio for in human resource management is to compare the rate of pay to the market or target compensation. Okay, and as we do this, what we essentially are doing is we're identifying the target or the market compensation by looking at the midpoint of the pay range for the target or the market. So for example, if we were looking at our target pay range and it went from $100,000 to $150,000, the midpoint of that would be $125,000, and that would be our point of comparison. So as we calculate the compa ratio, what we're essentially doing is we're taking either the average or individual pay that we're looking to analyze, and we're dividing it by that midpoint. Now, this may sound very similar to dividing a mean by a median, but that is not the case. The compa ratio is not a ratio of mean to median. It is a ratio of the average pay to the midpoint of the range. Okay, so we're going to go through an example here where we're going to look at target pay. And target pay works really well in compa ratios when we have what we call pay grades. And as you can see here on the graph over on the side here is that we have 6 different pay grades. And for each one of those pay grades, you see a box where there is a low end of the pay range and a high end of the pay range. Okay, now within each one of those boxes, we also have dots, and these dots have been plotted to show what our employees actually get paid. Okay, so as we look to develop a compa ratio here, we're going to take a closer look, and we're going to zoom in here on grade 4. Okay, and as we look at grade 4, what you'll see is that at the top end of grade 4, there is a maximum salary of $100,000, and at the bottom end of grade 4, there is a minimum salary of $80,000. Within grade 4, we have 6 different employees, and we can see their salaries are mapped out here, and their salaries range from $90,000 to $95,000. Okay, if we look at the range here, though, the actual pay range that we're using for our compa ratio is $80,000 to $100,000. Okay, the range that we're using is not 90 to 95. The range that we use in our compa ratios is the range of what people can actually get paid. It's not based upon what our current employees are getting paid. All right, so if we're looking at the range from $80,000 to $100,000, our midpoint is going to be $90,000. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to list out all of our salaries here. We've got 95, 94, 93, 91, 91, 90, and we're going to take the average of them, and that average works out to be $92,333. So as we calculate our compa ratio, again, we're going to take the average salaries and divide it by the midpoint. So that gives us that $92,333 that we came up with previously. And we're going to divide that by the midpoint of $90,000. And what we have here is a compa ratio of 1.03. So this compa ratio is just over 1, which means we might be slightly overpaying our employees compared to what we have targeted to pay them. But it's pretty common for compa ratios to be over 1. And this is not dangerously high or anything like that. So this is a fairly good compa ratio to have within your organization. Okay, now we can also look at compa ratios for individual employees. Now if we do this, and we're going to go back to our grade 4 pay, what we do is we take our employees' pay and we list it out, and we divide each employee's pay by that midpoint of the range. And what you'll see here is that we have compa ratios that range from 1 all the way down at the bottom here up to 1.06. Now, none of these are actually really high compa ratios. These are all pretty decent compa ratios. But what we use this for most often in human resource management would be when we're allocating pay increases after review cycles. Sometimes we'll look at compa ratios for individual employees, and those compa ratios will also be related to what type of increase an employee is eligible for. All right, and finally, we can use compa ratios to compare our pay to the market. So if we go back to our grade 4 example, we had a range of $80,000 to $100,000, and we had a compa ratio of 1.03, and it was based upon that range. But what if we took a look at the market range instead of our pay grade range? So let's say here, for this same position that we use grade 4 for, Queen Industries is paying $75,000. That's their minimum pay that they pay for that position. But over at Wayne Enterprises, employees can earn $125,000 for doing a similar job. That would give us a midpoint of $100,000. Now, if we took and decided to calculate the compa ratio based upon the market range, what we would do here is we would take the average that we came up with before, which was $92,333, and we would divide it by the midpoint for the market range, which is $100,000. That would give us a compa ratio of 0.92. Now, because this compa ratio is below 1, that would indicate that we're potentially underpaying our employees and that we could be at risk of losing good people, that we could be at risk of losing our employees to competitors out there in the market. So in summary, a compa ratio compares our pay to a target value or the market value of pay. Generally speaking, if a compa ratio is above 1, we might be overpaying our employees. If it is under 1, we might be underpaying them. Okay, it can be used to look at individuals or groups, so we can break down compa ratios by individual for purposes of allocating annual increases as we looked at previously, or we could take a look at our overall group to see if we are overpaying or underpaying for a specific position. Okay. The compa ratio works very effectively when you have pay grades. So in our example, we had 6 different pay grades that had defined bottoms and defined tops. So there was a defined range, and calculating the midpoint was very easy there. So compa ratios work well in those types of scenarios. And remember, the midpoint does not always equal the median. Okay, your median value is not your midpoint. Your midpoint looks at the range that we have for a specific pay grade, and the midpoint is in the middle of that range. Okay? Hope you enjoyed this. Hope you learned something. Thanks for joining me, and we'll talk to you soon.